Yeah, we're still in a practice session, so we're good until we hear that recording started. So. Good morning for those of us. Happy Monday for both of us. Those of you who are chiming in from the United States. Good evening, and again, happy Monday for those of you who are signing on from Asia. Welcome to the Stimson Center Japan Program event, introducing American Portrait, which is a survey project done in Taiwan, academic Sinica. I'm letting people into the webinar room, so we will get started in just a couple of minutes. Okay, I think we only have an hour this morning or this evening, depending on where you're signing in from, and especially if you're coming in from Asia, it's late. So thank you for staying up and powering through this webinar. We're gonna get started. Again, good morning or good evening. Happy Monday to everyone. My name is Yuki Tatsumi. I'm a co-director of East Asia Program and director of Japan Program at Stimson. Today, I have a super interesting presentation to share with you, which is the survey that was done in Taiwan in terms of regarding the Taiwanese confidence in the United States and Taiwanese perspectives on a PRC. Oftentimes, when we talk about cross-strait relations or U.S.-Taiwan relations here in the United States, we often talked about, well, we should do this because this would make a Taiwanese feel unsafe or insecure. But do we actually know what Taiwanese people living in Taiwan think and look at it? So hopefully, the survey titled "American Portrait" is will shed the light in some of those internal things that is going on in Taiwan. We have three fantastic speakers to share this survey result with us today. By the way, this is brand new. So we're probably the first one who got the privilege of sharing this result with you. This morning, we will start from Dr. Cheng-Hui Wu, who is currently a research fellow and professor in the Institute of European and American Studies in Academia Sinica in Taipei. Until a couple of months ago, he was actually, I'm happy to call him one of the Stimson alumni, where he spent about three months with us, where he looked at economic security and resiliency related issues. He will start the presentation by providing a brief overview of the project and the scope of the project. And we will go right into the presentation by Dr. Pan Hsin-Hsin, who is currently an associate professor in the Department of Sociology at Soochow University. And coming in last and as a cleanup hitter is a Dr. Wen-Chin Wu, who is an assistant research fellow at the Institute of Political Science at Academia Sinica in Taiwan. And just a little bit of a housekeeping notes. Following everybody's presentation, I will open it up to audience to a whole question and answer. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you see a Q&A column. For those of you who would like to ask any of the presenters a question about the results, please do use this column and don't be shy. You can start typing your questions as the presentation goes on. And please do not put your question in a chat box. Those are saved for me communicating something with our panelists. So I will not be monitoring this box unless I need to communicate with one of the panelists. So please do put all your questions in a Q&A box. So without further ado, we'll start off with Cheng-Hui. Thank you for giving us a chance to share these results.
Okay. Good morning, Yuki. Just one more note before I speak on about our project. If we our panelist would be actually James Lee, who is also assistant research fellow in the Institute of European American Studies in academic Sinica. He is now also a fellow of NATO College. And before we start with our project, we have to do some usual disclaimers. And the view of this project, of course, the view present today does not reflect the views on NATO Defense College, NATO Academic Sinica, nor the government of Taiwan. This is the ordinary or usual disclaimer which would apply in this presentation. So basically, the purpose of this project is whether how Taiwanese they perceive U.S. measures and how they perceive U.S. and PRC, how these two big countries, how we perceive these two countries, especially since we it's a conventional wisdom that Taiwan is a very Philo-American society, which because not only economically security in security sense, but also a lot of leaders in Taiwan, they have their either PhD. The former president, the current president, she has her master in Cornell. So the common sense would be the Taiwan society should be a very Philo-American society. But to some degree, it could be counterintuitive. And in the past few years, there are so many maybe due to some disinformation, and there are some arising, which we call U.S. skepticism, which means that some of the majors the U.S. try to signal cannot be well received by Taiwanese audience. So the purpose of this project, starting from 3 years ago, we have done 3 waves of survey, and the purpose of this is to measure how Taiwanese population generally they perceive and receive the signal, some specific measures. And can we turn to next, please? So, before I start, I hand the mic to Dr. Hsin-Hsin Pan. I want to credit all of the, of course, all of the hard work are done by the team members, and in particular, the graphs in the presentation are produced by Dr. Wenjun Wu. And again, as I said, the American portrait is an annual survey. We do both 9 telephone, but also a mobile one. And it's sponsored by Institute of European American Studies at Academic Sinica, and which is a public fund institution. And it is actually administered by the Election Center in National Chencghi University, which is also a public fund university. And the sample consists of 1,211 adults in Taiwan. So as I said, it surveys using mobile phone and landline. So, and the major, the main aim or the overarching aim is to understand how we see U.S.-Taiwan relations, and also the U.S.-China relations, and how it impacts on Taiwan per se. So this is the reason why we arrange this press release with Stimson is we want to surely those people, especially people in a DC circle, how we see US. I think this is one of the important elements which has been absent in the past few years when we talk about Taiwan issue. Yeah, I would hand the mic to Hsin-Hsin. You have the floor, please.
Okay. I will start from the signature battery of questions on the U.S. and China credibility in Taiwan, and then I'll switch after my presentation. I'll switch the floor to Jay Pleat about the status quo preferences about Taiwan's future status. And next slide, please. So, U.S. credibility. Taiwan has always been, like Jim just said, Taiwan has been a very pro-U.S. country. So essentially, we should be placed, since the United States is the sole protector for Taiwan security. So we should place great credibility to China, to the United States. But the issue is we find a decline. The U.S. credibility declined substantially between 2021 to 2022. And this is a drastic drop by about 11%. And we suspect that the drop may come from the occurrence of the Ukraine war and how the United States government respond to the Ukraine war makes a reference to Taiwan, like tell people in Taiwan to imagine what if the war should break out in Taiwan, what would the U.S. government respond to it? And this year, the percentage remains stable. About 1/3 of population still place confidence in the U.S. credibility. And that means the trend is going stable during our election year. Next slide, please. Compared to the U.S. credibility, China's credibility is way more lower than the U.S. credibility. So the belief in China's credibility starts from 13.5% in the year of 2021, and then drops to the digital point to 9.37% in the year of 2023, and again, the figure remains stable in the year of 2023. So the digital figure, note that the digital figure is about the same to the percentage of the population supporting for the unification with China. And that is a strong signal when China's credibility plays in the domestic politics in Taiwan. Next slide, please. So compare with the China and China's credibility and the U.S. credibility, we find that still the percentage of the population plays the credibility in the U.S. is about like 3 times the number of respondents placing the China's credibility in Taiwan. So still, the United States gains greater credibility in Taiwan compared to that in China. And when we look into the partisan, the people's stance on the cross-strait relations, we find that great majority in Taiwan still show that they're either going to decide later and status quo forever or independence later. So we still a great overwhelming percentage of the population here are conservative about their preference for the cross-strait relations. So, and that trend has consistently been really stable across in the last 3 years. And the percentage of supporting for the unification with China, still immediate unification with China drops to like almost 0. So there is no political market in Taiwan to support for the defense of Taiwan and support for unification with China. As for the support for the independence of Taiwan, we don't find drastic change. And there is still about like 5% or like 3 to 5% of the population support for immediate independence. So overall, the trend shows that Taiwan is extremely unlikely to be the one that rocks the boat in the cross-strait relations. Next slide, please. So if we should break down the U.S. credibility by partisanship, we find on the right-hand side, for those who assign greater credibility to the U.S., those are DPP supporters. DPP is the sitting government, is running the sitting government now. And on the other extreme, those are KMT supporters and TPP supporters, the two major underdog parties that in the hope of making the president and the vice president on the same ticket. And those are the two parties that they have less percentage of the population place the credibility to the U.S. government. So for those non-partisans, they are like in the middle. So the DPP supporters are actually the driving force to the U.S. credibility in Taiwan. And as for China's credibility, we find that the two parties flip around. So DPP supporters, about like 2% this year, no, 2% of the DPP supporters place credibility in the Chinese government. So there's almost like zero, very few little population DPP supporters will place credibility in the Chinese government, whereas the KMT supporters place greater confidence. The figure is almost like 10 times as big as the DPP supporters, that they place confidence, credibility in the Chinese government. So we can see that in Taiwan, the driving force for the U.S. credibility is the DPP supporters, which are supporters for the sitting government, and the major supporters for the credibility in China, those are KMT supporters. So that's why we see the average trend is actually that there is a partisan drives behind the credibility in the United States and the China's credibility. Next slide, please. As for the perceptions of U.S. signals, for the last few years, the U.S. government has been releasing several signals to its security commitment to Taiwan. We find air and naval patrol, presidential commitment, and high-level visits are the top three powerful signals that over 60% of the population in Taiwan trust that they are effective in assuring Taiwan's security. For air and naval patrols, they're the grand gestures that put American soldiers' lives in harm's way to assure to release the strongest signal to the U.S. security commitment to Taiwan. And high-level visits and presidential commitments are political gestures that also are almost equivalently effective to military deployments. So, as for arms sales and arms giving, our arms transfers has been a norm in between the United States and Taiwan for the last 4 decades. So, the two signals are also very effective for the people in Taiwan, despite there's not much difference between the two. So, people in Taiwan do not really care if the arms is for sale or for give, as long as we get sufficient arms here. So those are effective U.S. signals to its security commitment to Taiwan. Next slide, please. And we should break down the U.S. signals by the respondents' partisanship. We find the DPP and TMT stand on the two extremes. So TPP supporters are mostly sensitive to the U.S. signal in a positive way. There's the greatest number of DPP supporters who perceive of the U.S. signals of various types of U.S. signals as an assurance to the U.S. security commitment to Taiwan, whereas KMT supporters, way fewer KMT supporters who believe in that same way, and TPP and non-partisans, they sit in somewhere in the middle between the two parties. So we can detect there are drastic distance between the two DPP and KMT supporters in that sense when they perceive of U.S. security signals to Taiwan. Next slide. So next, I'm gonna switch the floor to James Lee, who is gonna talk about exciting feature signatures in our survey, silicon shield. James, please.
Thank you, Hsin-Hsin, and thank you all very much for coming. So in our third wave of this survey, we've included questions about the silicon shield, which is an argument centered on the importance of TSMC for Taiwan's security. And one side of the silicon shield argument focuses on how TSMC relates to the United States' role in Taiwan's security and the likelihood of American intervention in Taiwan's defense because of the strategic importance of Taiwan's semiconductor industry. So on the US side of this kind of argument, you can break it down even further into two types of arguments, a positive silicon shield and a negative silicon shield. The positive silicon shield argument is about affirming the likelihood of American support in the event of a Chinese attack by focusing on how TSMC's importance makes the likelihood of US intervention much higher. That's the positive way of interpreting the silicon shield. There's also a negative silicon shield argument, which appears prominently in debates in Taiwanese politics, which could also be characterized as the argument about the kind of negative impact of TSMC's investments. For example, TSMC setting up its fabs in Arizona, but also more broadly, the globalization of TSMC's manufacturing, how it relates to the likelihood of American intervention in Taiwan's defense. So the negative silicon shield argument would be focusing on how theoretically TSMC's investments could make it less likely that the US will intervene. So these should be two sides of the same coin. So if we believe that TSMC's importance makes American likelihood intervention more likely, then declining significance of TSMC's role in Taiwan and its offshoring to the United States, which should make it theoretically less likely that the US would intervene. But what we actually found in our survey research was that just because people believe one kind of side of the argument doesn't necessarily mean that they'll believe the other side of the argument, and it tends to be filtered quite heavily through partisanship. So overall, the most significant finding that we found was that even though TSMC is very much in the news and features very prominently in political debates in Taiwan, the belief in the silicon shield argument overall doesn't reach an absolute majority of respondents. So if we look at the entire sample, 44.62% of our respondents said that they believed in the positive silicon shield. A slightly lower proportion, 38.61%, said they believed in the negative silicon shield argument. But actually, it never reaches an absolute majority for either the positive or the negative arguments. But if we break it down by partisanship, it supports the interpretation that Hsin-Hsin presented earlier about how you have the DPP at one end of the spectrum, you have the KMT at the other end of the spectrum, and the TPP, the third party, which is now considering a joint ticket with the KMT, that party tends to be somewhat in the middle in terms of what its supporters believe about the silicon shield argument. So the DPP supporters tend to be much more positive in the way they think about the silicon shield. 74.19% of the respondents who identified it as DPP supporters said that they believe that TSMC's significance makes it more likely the US will intervene. Whereas KMT supporters were much less likely to believe in the positive silicon shield and much more likely to believe in the negative silicon shield argument. 52.51% of KMT partisans in our sample said that TSMC's investments in the United States make it less likely the US will intervene in Taiwan's defense. And the TPP tends to occupy sort of a mid-range between those two sides, though it is interesting that their kind of median position tends to be for the positive silicon shield argument, and they believe in the negative silicon shield argument at the same rates as the KMT partisans do. So there's a kind of a general trend that we're seeing in our data where Cohen's presentation of the TPP's platform as being in the middle between the KMT KMT and the DPP is reflected in the views that the supporters of his party exhibit in the way that they think about Taiwan's security. So that's our finding on TSMC and the Silicon Shield and Taiwan's economic security. And we also have a set of questions about how respondents in Taiwan think about the status quo and how it relates to the unification independence issue. So before I go into that discussion of what our findings are, I want to make a conceptual distinction, how we think about these concepts analytically. So these kinds of statements, Taiwan is or is not part of China, those are positions of what Taiwan's current status is. They're interpretations of the status quo. The status quo is a highly contested term between Washington and Beijing. It's also a highly contested term within Taiwan, and it's a term whose meaning has never really been kind of laid down in a way that everyone agrees on. But these statements about Taiwan being a part or not being a part of China, the 92 consensus or no 92 consensus, those are interpretations of what the status quo is. Distinct from that, our position of what Taiwan's future status should be. So Taiwan unifying with China or Taiwan declaring independence from China, those will all be changes to the status quo. And we need to make a distinction between interpretations of Taiwan's current status and preferences on Taiwan's future status, because what we found in our data is that these two concepts are highly correlated, but they're not necessarily the same. And there are some interesting results. So to give an example on how we can make this kind of distinction in terms of a policy statement. So when President Tsai Ing-wen was interviewed by the BBC in 2020, she said that we don't have a need to declare ourselves an independent state. We are an independent country already, and we call ourselves the Republic of China, Taiwan. So to an outside observer, it might get confusing. Is this a declaration of independence or is it not? And how does this line up with Tsai's affirmation of the status quo? So it's not a declaration of independence because she says we don't have a need to declare ourselves an independent state. So that is a denial that she intends to change the status quo. But she affirms an interpretation of what Taiwan's current status is, already being an independent country, and the name of that country being the Republic of China, Taiwan. So in this statement, we see a balance of an affirmation of Taiwan's sovereignty and an assurance that Taiwan under Tsai Ing-wen will not change the status quo. So these are our results on how respondents in our survey interpret the status quo on the critical issue of the political relationship between Taiwan and China. So a striking majority, 78.41% of our respondents said that Taiwan and China do not belong to the same country. This is much stronger for DPP supporters, with 95.79% of respondents saying Taiwan and China do not belong to the same country. With the KMT, a much lower proportion of KMT respondents think of Taiwan and China not being part of the same country. But even then, it is still interesting to note that even though the KMT as a party advances its interpretation of the One China principle being the 1992 consensus, that even among KMT supporters, 55% say that Taiwan and China do not belong to the same country. So there are KMT partisans who actually don't agree with the KMT's position on cross-strait relations, which is interesting. Among TPP supporters, we see the kind of general pattern of them falling in the middle between the KMT and DPP supporters, where 84.66% of TPP supporters say that Taiwan and China do not belong to the same country. So among respondents who indicated that Taiwan and China were not part of the same country, we asked a follow-up question about what Taiwan's name as a country is. So we saw earlier that President Tsai Ing-wen has said Taiwan is already an independent country called the Republic of China, Taiwan. But there are other alternative ways of naming Taiwan. So we gave people a few options. One being the Republic of China, and then Republic of China, Taiwan, the Republic of China in Taiwan, which is a term that started during the Li Denghui presidency. Another option being Taiwan, and another option being Republic of Taiwan. And this is kind of the range between the most blue and the most green ends of the spectrum. And it's generally believed in this discussions of Taiwan security that if Taiwan were to change its name to Republic of Taiwan, that would be a declaration of independence. But we ask respondents, what do you think Taiwan's current name is? So very few said Republic of Taiwan. Most said that they believe Taiwan was called the Republic of China, and a significant proportion also believe that it was the ROC Taiwan. And the proportion of respondents who skipped the question is about the same as the ones who said that Taiwan's name is Republic of China, Taiwan. So the overview, the data is that the largest category are respondents who say Taiwan's name, who first believe Taiwan and China are not the same country. The largest proportion of respondents say that Taiwan's name as a country is Republic of China. And then we have two large groups of respondents who either skip the question or say Taiwan's name is Republic of China, Taiwan. And the other designations for Taiwan do not find support among a high proportion of respondents. And what's interesting about the TPP respondents is that they are even more likely to say that Taiwan is the Republic of China than KMT supporters. But we see in this earlier slide, they're also much more likely than KMT supporters to say that Taiwan is and China are not the same country. So this is really counterintuitive and interesting, because typically in Taiwanese political discourse, people who strongly affirm the Republic of China are associated with blue or deep blue preferences, one China principle, according to the KMT's interpretation. The name of the country is the Republic of China. Symbols of ROC sovereignty, like the ROC flag, those things are all kind of bundled together. But what we see with TPP supporters is that those things are not bundled together. And it's quite interesting that they are more likely to believe that Taiwan and China are not the same country, but they're also much more likely to call Taiwan the Republic of China. So that was an interesting and counterintuitive finding from this wave of our survey. And we have a range of questions about what people think about Taiwan's future status, and it confirms the results that have come out from the Election Studies Center at National Chencghi University generally, that the most respondents say that they support the status quo. A significant minority favors status quo now, independence later. Almost nobody supports immediate unification. And noticeable, though still a small minority of respondents want unification at some point in the future. So this has remained fairly stable across the three waves of our survey, and it supports and it corroborates the findings that have come out of other surveys. So then we break it down by what people think about various options of the status quo, depending on whether they also answered Taiwan was the same country as China or was a different country from China. So the main distinction between these two groups, the ones who say Taiwan and China are the same country and the ones who don't, is that the ones who say Taiwan and China are the same country tend to be more supportive of status quo now, unification later, whereas the ones who say Taiwan and China do not belong to the same country are more likely to support status quo now, independence later. You can kind of see how the proportions of the responses to these questions are flipped, but still the majority opinion is still some form of the status quo, either status quo now, decide later, or status quo forever. But it's worth mentioning and emphasizing that even though both groups support the status quo, they have significantly different interpretations of what the status quo is. So to provide an overview of our findings, we found that the belief in U.S. credibility in Taiwan declined between 2021 and 2022, and has remained stable between 2022 and 2023, and that the belief in U.S. credibility in Taiwan is much greater than the belief in the PRC credibility. And among respondents in Taiwan, they found that U.S. air and naval patrols of the Taiwan Strait are the most effective U.S. signals at reassuring Taiwan, followed by U.S. presidential commitments and high-level visits. So it seems that these data show that actions speak more loudly than words, and the presence of U.S. warships and air and naval patrols in the Taiwan Strait are the most effective at reassuring people in Taiwan. And the belief in the Silicon Shield argument does not reach an absolute majority of respondents, even though the Silicon Shield argument has featured very prominently in Taiwan's domestic politics. And the vast majority of respondents in Taiwan, almost 80%, interpret the status quo to mean that Taiwan and China do not belong to the same country. So that brings my part of the presentation to a close, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lee. For those of you in the audience, I put the link to the actual survey as a whole on a chat section of it. So if you would like to copy that and put it into your browser for your future reference, please do so. And of course, if you missed that, we can always ask us after the event, and we're happy to share that link with you as well. So last but not least, Dr. Wu.
Oh, Wei-Chin actually will be answering questions, but that brings us to the end of the presentation itself.
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you. My name is Wen-Qing Wu. So I think I will take some questions, but I think I'm not able to answer all of the questions based on our survey data. So I think there's a question asking whether
yeah, so let me then go right in, and then I'll start. You can decide amongst yourself who wants to add your perspective. So I may not go necessarily in the order that it came, but one of the thing is the first question that I wanted to ask. This is a little bit more related to the current event, so I don't know which one of you would like to answer. Mr. Moriyasu asked that at the Biden-Xi summit in San Francisco last week, President Biden was asked if he is still committed to the defense of Taiwan while having to handle wars in Ukraine and Gaza. And unlike in the past, he really did not give a clear answer to that question. Do you think moving forward, there's something like this could affect the confidence statistics? Let's say if you run the survey like today, do you think you will see a change?
Because we don't run the survey, so I have the correct answer, I guess. But I would guess that if Biden, in that case, I think when Biden does not say anything, that will not affect Taiwanese people's perception on U.S. credibility or how Taiwanese will perceive the U.S. Defense of Taiwan, unless Biden says something positive or negative. And based on our data, we show that when the president makes some statement, and people will have different perception on that. So I think at this moment, I don't think the meeting will affect Taiwanese people's perception based on our data. Yeah, so I think that's what we can answer so far. Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else would like to add your comments? Okay, moving on. There's actually a clarification question about the terms that you used in a survey. It's come from Clint Work from KI. Forgive me if you've mentioned this already, but could you define what you mean by belief in China's credibility? Credibility about what exactly?
So I think that's a very good question. So in our survey, we did not specifically define what credibility is, because we conduct our survey in Chinese. So we ask whether respondents disagree or agree on the following statement: whether China in the United States is a credible country. So in Chinese, it's called 讲信用. So it means that whether they keep their word. So in plain English, it means that whether you agree or disagree that China is a country that will keep its word, or the United States will keep its word. So it means 讲信用. So it's an overall statement. So we did not specifically ask whether they think that the U.S. will keep its security commitment to Taiwan or something like that. But we do have other questions related to U.S. defense of Taiwan in different scenarios in our data, and we uploaded the result in our website, so you can check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, we frame the question in a general term for the credibility for the United States and China on purpose because we have intensive interactions with the two major powers commercially, politically, diplomatically on all fronts. So we need a question. So we planned a question. We designed a question that captured the overall credibility for the two countries. So as for the details, like which part of the credibility that the two countries do they differ? Do they differ differently? Yes. Actually, we have greater percentage of the population place credibility to the U.S. government when it comes to military front, like specifically the U.S. U.S. security commitment to Taiwan. So maybe, but for China, we do not go into details to measure like the overall to break down the overall credibility into different dimensions. Those are the dimensions that we will look into, like China's credibility and U.S. credibility on very many fronts in the following surveys.
And just to follow up on what my colleagues have said, so as I said, we didn't examine how people interpret the idea of the PRC having credibility or not having credibility. We didn't ask a series of follow-up questions, but this is one context in which the idea of PRC credibility could be relevant for understanding Taiwan's security, which is that one of the PRC's proposals to Taiwan is that if Taiwan accepts the 1992 consensus, then cross-strait tensions will diminish significantly. But there is kind of an implied assurance that the PRC won't then try to ramp up pressure even further on Taiwan by saying Taiwan accepts 92 consensus, and then therefore Taiwan needs to make kind of progress toward unifying with China. And so whether or not people believe that kind of assurance from the PRC, basically, if Taiwan accepts the 92 consensus or the One China principle, Beijing will stop there and will not ramp up the pressure the way it's been doing toward Taiwan in the last 8 years. If people believe the PRC is credible, then they might think that reducing tensions in the Taiwan Strait may just be a matter of saying yes or no to 92 consensus. But if the PRC isn't credible, and this is a slippery slope toward further pressure on Taiwan, then the lack of PRC credibility could be a major concern among the Taiwanese public. And to kind of give a concrete example for why that assurance may not actually be credible on the PRC side is that in the recent discussions between Biden and Xi, it was reported that Xi, while affirming China's support for a peaceful approach to cross-strait disputes, did say to Biden that he did not think that this dispute could be postponed indefinitely, and he affirmed his belief in the need for a resolution. So that kind of statement about needing to resolve this dispute is something, even though we don't have evidence on it, I think is something that would create concern in Taiwan.
So next question actually is coming from one of your colleagues, Peter Sui from Academic Sinica. He points out that it's interesting to see that TPP interviewee consider themselves more to Taiwan, themselves more to Taiwan than DPP interviewees. Is there any implication or explanation for this phenomenon? Since in Taiwan, for the political spectrum, people will consider DPP supporters have a more pro-Taiwan identity. Any of you care to comment?
I think one quick answer for that is that the current TPP supporters are young generations. So there's a common sense that young generations are either nature independence, 天然独, or 天然台. So I think that's why they think themselves as more Taiwanese. But we did not present our result by age group, but I think that might be the explanation for this interesting result. Yeah.
So interesting. There is actually a question from the audience that directly talks to that. So based on the survey and other research, can any of you comment or share your perspective on whether there are significant differences between the younger and older generations in terms of how they perceive U.S.-Taiwan relations?
That's an interesting question. So far we haven't done that yet because we don't have a good explanation or a theoretical explanation for the difference. Yeah, we can expect that there might be difference, but at this moment, even we see the difference, we may not be able to provide a very theoretical explanation for the difference. Yeah, so that's why we choose to focus on more theoretical oriented result in our presentation. But yeah, we will be happy to provide more result regarding the difference among age group. Yeah, if someone can send us an email and then we can send them the result. Yeah, thank you very much.
And we would be happy to, if it's okay with you all panelists, we would offer it to the audience today if any of them wants to get in touch with you to learn more about the survey, to share your contact info with you, with them. Is that going to be okay?
Certainly.
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. So this is a basic question coming from Nirmal Ghosh from Straits Times. Did any of these survey results surprise you in any way?
I was particularly surprised by the fact that the belief in the Silicon Shield doesn't reach an absolute majority of respondents. And because I work in kind of the study of geoeconomics and Taiwan security, so I thought people in Taiwan would have been much more willing to believe in the idea of the Silicon Shield. But the fact that it didn't reach over 50% was quite surprising to me.
What strikes me most is the gap between the U.S. overall credibility and also the credibility of the U.S. security commitment to Taiwan. There's a gap between the two. Obviously, more people are willing to assign credibility to the U.S. security commitment to Taiwan than the overall U.S. credibility. And part of that may be attributed to other dimensions of the U.S. credibility, for instance, like international trade. So that's why we designed a battery of questions regarding to the TSMC, the semiconductor conductor plants in the U.S. to see how people are swayed by the U.S. skepticism rhetorics in Taiwan regarding how the United States might have a conspiracy against Taiwan. That's the part that surprises me most.
Something else that surprised me, speaking for myself, was this result here. If you can all see my screen, looking at how people interpret the nature of the status quo. And what I find most surprising about this is the responses among KMT supporters, that over 50% of KMT partisans in the sample say that Taiwan and China are not part of the same country, which highlights the fact that it's important to not just look at what the KMT says as a party. It seems like what the KMT says as a party may not be fully in sync with what its support base believes. And if there's this continual sort of tension between what the party says its platform is and what its supporters say, this was a really surprising result to me, and just speculating here, but it's possible that this is a sign that the KMT's support for the One China principle may not last over the long term.
So now that you mentioned about the KMT support base and how they may be as a party position and their support base, what the support base believe may be diverging, there is actually one specific question. So for any of you care to comment about what you think about, do these results suggest that TPP or KMT voters may not vote for the combined tickets candidate? I guess clearly we're looking at the presidential election here. Any takers? This is kind of a speculative question, so.
Yeah, we didn't ask any questions directly about what people think about the main candidates, though it is perhaps worthwhile to observe that given that there is this kind of weak support for the One China principle among KMT respondents, that the fact that Hou You-yi has been kind of delicate in talking about the One China principle and 1992 consensus kind of may reflect this kind of unease among the support base. And even though he eventually affirmed the 1992 consensus, if you read his article on foreign affairs, he says that he supports the 1992 consensus. He didn't say he believes in it. And so he's much less ideologically committed to the idea of 1992 consensus compared to Ma Ying-jeou and more traditional figures in the KMT. So we didn't ask what people think about the candidates, but this may help to shed light on how the parties have taken certain positions in the recent campaign.
Anyone else has additional thoughts to add? Another question. So there are a lot of this is a question about U.S. messaging. Do you think that the U.S. government, based on this survey, should emphasize more on what you said about behavior? So, for example, aerial naval patrols on across the strait area, than arms sales to Taiwan, for example, according to survey, based on this survey.
I don't think that necessarily follows from our results, that even though the relationship between arms sales and perceptions of the likelihood of U.S. intervention may be lower than the air and naval patrols, it doesn't mean that the U.S. should place less emphasis on arms sales compared to air and naval patrols, because the arms sales are not primarily intended to provide signals of reassurance. The U.S. is not selling the kinds of arms to Taiwan that would be needed for convincing the members of the public to have certain expectations about U.S. behavior in the event of a Taiwan contingency. Rather, the purpose of these arms sales is to bolster Taiwan's deterrent in Taiwan's defense. So there's a debate right now about whether Taiwan should adopt a fully asymmetric strategy versus a symmetric strategy. And if this was just about signaling, then you might think that if the U.S. policy was based on the need to signal U.S. commitment, then the U.S. might really go for the big ticket, very flashy kinds of advanced weapon systems. But instead, the U.S. has placed less emphasis on those traditional big ticket items like tanks and fighter jets, and more emphasis on asymmetric capabilities, which is based on what the U.S. thinks is necessary for Taiwan to be able to defend itself if Beijing attacks. So I think our results show that there are different types of policy instruments the U.S. can use, and there is a range of effects that they have, but the range of effects that they have kind of should be based on what the U.S. is intending to do. And so our results kind of show what kinds of effects different policy instruments can have on perceptions of the U.S. in Taiwan's public.
And adding upon James' comments, I would like to say that people in Taiwan constantly receive mixed and inconsistent messages from Washington. Sometimes the president says one thing and his staffer says another, and the Congress may say something, and then people from the State Department may just come out and say something. So people in Taiwan, we suspect that they might have they're constantly exposed to mixed messages from Washington, and some people here might have selective exposure to this mixed information. So some might take positive messages more seriously, some might take negative messages negatively. So these are the questions worthwhile looking into in future studies, like how people interpret mixed messages, and sometimes when they're consistent, do they enforce their confidence in the U.S. security commitment to Taiwan? And these are the information environment is quite can be quite confusing for people in Taiwan, and let alone then the Chinese government has been constantly releasing um, um, misinformation, disinformation, or like its own version of interpretation of U.S. signals. So this question is worthwhile looking into in the future.
So I think this is actually what caught my attention when I was going, reviewing your presentation slides. So according to your survey results, between 2021 and 2022, the confidence in the United States really drops. It's a heavy drop, about 12 point. And between 22 to 23, it's holding steady, but then it's still, the percentage of the people who said they have confidence in, consider U.S. as a credible partner is, well below 40%. What do you think? What do you think are the factors that resulted in these results?
So I think one possibility is about the Ukraine war, because we conduct our 2022 survey in late 2022 after Ukraine war break out for several months. So I think that's one possibility. But unfortunately, we are not able to test that conjecture in our data. But I think in the answer box, I provide a recent study conducted by TY1 at United States University. So they have a panel data. They show that the Taiwanese people may have different perceptions after Ukraine war, but they don't study U.S. credibility. They study about U.S. Security commitment to Taiwan. So yeah, so in some public opinion data in Taiwan, there's a discussion or finding that Taiwanese public opinion have different thought after about the U.S. Potential defense of Taiwan after the Ukraine war. Yeah, so I think that might be indirect evidence for that, and to support why there's a drop of the security commitment or the credibility of the United States in Taiwan. Yeah, thank you. So the TY's paper is published in Asian Survey this week.
Okay.
So,
okay,
yeah.
Great. So this might have to be my last question to you all, and this is completely speculative. So feel free to think your own minds. But question is, and then it's obviously way out of the scope of the survey results that we've been discussing about for the last hour. How are the Taiwanese people? I know because Japanese are very concerned about this too. So this person's coming in from. How concerned are the Taiwanese people about possible Trump presidency or any other U.S. administration that could have more isolationist tendency as a result of the 2024 election? I know this is already talked a lot in Japan, so I'm pretty sure that's why this question is coming from.
It's very strange because Trump, as you may have known, Trump used to be very popular in Taiwan. It's very paradoxical.
Was he?
You didn't know that.
Well,
So,
actually, he was actually popular in certain circle in Japan too. So that does not necessarily surprise me, but
so we actually, in our case, we have already the current status now is we are worried more about the local election, and so after that we would think about Trump or Biden. But I think that what is related to this project is, I think the two candidates, if there's two team, then one would be very close to China, the other would be very close to US, especially the ambassador Xiao. She just came back from DC to Taipei to run for the vice presidency. So I think the U.S. policy will in fact an impact on Taiwan, and we in our project we also think about who is the current president of US would highly impact on the US credibility. But eventually we didn't add this element into our survey, but I think the credibility of US presidents, who is the current president would eventually highly impact on the credibility of US. And I think the concern of Trump is indeed a valid one. Yeah.
I think popular opinion wise, people need more information about the candidates' positions, foreign policy stances when they actually announce that. So I think in the information streamline, people like the general public in Taiwan will probably like wait until then to decide what they think about this. So as of now, like Trump is very likely to run the presidential election again in the United States. And people are not aware of what his foreign policy might be regarding to the cross-strait relations. So if we should fail a survey right now, I guess that people will probably really have no idea what's going on. But in the previous during Trump's presidency, he's hugely popular in Hong Kong and Taiwan. These are the two places where he gained the greatest popularity on the planet, mainly because he is the first U.S. president standing up against China. So, and let alone in the year of 2019, that the suppression of China's suppression of Hong Kong, that greatly boost the Trump's tough image as tough in China. So as of now, he probably maintains such image in Taiwan, but we'll see after when the presidential candidates are sure for certain are nominated by the Republican and Democrats in the United States.
Great. Thank you, everyone. This hour came to a close, and I'm sorry for those whose question we couldn't get to, but I see that all of my panelists this morning was way tech savvy than I. So while I was trying to field the questions, some of you are taking initiative and basically directly responding to the questions. So thank you for helping fielding some of those questions. Again, this was a very, very interesting survey, and gives us a perspective of the viewpoint that often is not really discussed broadly here meaning U.S. community. A lot of times we kind of discuss these things as though we know what people in Taiwan thinks and how people thinks in a certain way, but we really don't. And I think the survey results really kind of shed a light on that. So with that, thank you everyone for joining me, and thank you so much everyone for staying up late. And for those of you who are and that goes to say for those of you who are signing on to this webinar from Asia, and for those of us who are coming in from US, for braving your way onto a Monday morning webinar and Thanksgiving week. That I think shows you that that level of interest on this topic is very high. So look forward to seeing your future survey results when you do so, and any other survey projects that you may conduct revolving around this topic. We will be happy to share the results and collaborate pushing the results out there. So thank you again. Happy Thanksgiving for everybody. And this concludes the webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.